So we're going to cover Section C, cognitive patterns, and we're going to go through about 35 to 40 minutes of kind of didactic material, and then we're going to break, and we're going to, not break, literally, we're going to work at your tables, and we have some role play activities that I think are very helpful in working with the skills, and again, you can experience it here and bring it back to your organizations and share it with them as, again, another tool. So we'll start, and we have our acronyms, not as many today, but the most important one that we're going to be working with today is the BIMS, which is the brief interview for mental status, and we'll be talking about that. So this section, Section C, cognitive patterns, hopefully by the end of the session, we will be able to apply the coding instructions to accurately code the patient scenarios, and you will have the opportunity to demonstrate application of this process of the brief interview for mental status with your partner or peer or someone at your table. Or if you are watching this remotely, drag someone in and or turn to someone if you're watching in a conference room and certainly participate in this activity. So the items that we're going to be looking for in Section C, let me just actually step back. Probably you're saying, well, wait a minute, Section C is not new. Why are you doing this? And there's been a lot of requests coming in to review this training, have this training again at this session. So here we are doing it. It hasn't really changed, but we want to, since we're getting so many requests, we wanted to go through this material. So just to frame that for you. So in Section C, we have C0100. That's your gateway question. So should a brief interview or mental status be conducted? Then we have C0200 through C0500, which is the actual brief interview for mental status, or the BIMS. And then C0600, should the staff assessment for mental status be conducted? Is another question. And then C0900, memory/recall ability. And we're going to go through all of those. So in Section C, the items are intended to determine the patient's attention, orientation, and ability to register and recall new information. So that's hopefully what we're going to assess, or we will be assessing, not hopefully assessing, but that's what we'll be trying to assess when we do this section. So what are the rationale? Well, it's a structured cognitive test or interview. It's more accurate and reliable than observation alone for evaluating cognitive performance. So it is important that we look at that and we say, I'm trying to get my timer here. It's better than just looking at it and making your own assessment. Well, I think this or I think that, versus actually going in and doing this interview and getting concrete information. It prevents patients mislabeling based on appearance or assumed diagnosis. And we've seen this where people who have hearing issues and they've got hearing aids and the batteries are dead. Have we ever seen someone like that? And they can't hear us, they're struggling to communicate, and in fact, then we're saying, oh, they must have some sort of a cognitive impairment, when in fact they need new batteries. So it efficiently provides insight into the patient's current conditions that will enhance the quality of care, because it's going to be critically important, right? We have to communicate with our patients to help rehab them and be able to discharge them to whatever setting that they're going to be going to. And assist identifying needed supports or opportunities where, for example, if we needed to reinforce certain concepts during therapy, it would be nice to know this based off of the interview that we've done. So C0100, this is that gateway question. Should the brief interview for mental status be completed? This item identifies if the interview should be attempted. The BIMS is a structured cognitive interview, and most patients are able to attempt the interview. Please do not assume because someone has a cognitive impairment or they're a little hard of hearing or any one of the other things that you should automatically go to the staff assessment. Most people, it's amazing, when you do attempt it, they can try and actually perform well on the BIMS. So you'll see the call out of this question, and it said, should the brief interview of mental status, C0200 to 500, be conducted? It's a 3-day assessment period and attempted to conduct the interview with all patients. So just reinforcing that. And then you'd answer the question, yes or no. If you cannot, do the interview, because the patient is rarely or never understood, you're going to skip over to C0900 memory recall ability, which is basically the staff assessment. So the steps for the assessment, we want to determine if the patient is rarely or never understood, verbally or in writing. So if they can't verbalize it, but they can write it, we can still do this assessment. And then if it's rarely or never understood, you're going to skip to C0900 and looking at the memory recall ability. And then we're going to determine if the patient needs or wants an interpreter. If so, complete the interview with an interpreter, and that could be based on the language. It could be that they need American Sign Language, whatever it is. We need to make sure that we have that opportunity to have an interpreter there to work with us to be able to do the BIMS. Again, in the call-out box here, the BIMS should be attempted on all patients, so really should try to do this. It only needs to be conducted once during the 3-day assessment period. That has come up with the questions, how many times should I do it? It's not one of these things where you want to keep doing it until they score better. It is okay to just do it once and then you've completed it. So what we want to do here is record whether the cognitive interview should be attempted with the patient. You complete it once during the 3-day period. It's a yes/no question. And again, we've already talked about it, but if the person is rarely or never understood, or they can't verbally communicate or can't communicate to you in writing, or even with an accommodation of some sort of interpreter, then you want to skip to C0900. Some of the coding tips, if it's not possible for a needed interpreter to participate on the day of the interview, code C0100 equals 0 to indicate the interview was not attempted. And then complete C0900 staff assessment for mental status instead. It includes patients with the use of American Sign Language. I will tell you, though, if at all possible, you should complete the BIMS. So let's talk about the BIMS. This is a test interview that tests for cognitive function, and it decreases the chance of incorrect labeling or cognitive ability and improves detection of delirium. So you will be able to get some insight on having someone to really focus on what you're saying and to work with you. Cognitively intact patients may appear to be cognitively impaired because of a language barrier, hearing impairment, or local lack of social interaction. Some patients may appear to be more cognitively intact than they actually are. Have we ever met someone like that? You just scratch the surface, they have all the social graces, and then you go past that, and then you realize, ooh, Houston, we have a problem. Misdiagnosis of cognitive impairment may result in inappropriate communication, worthwhile activities, and therapies not being offered. So if we pigeonhole someone based on what we think, and we don't do this interview, we could not allow the patient to reach kind of their best self. So what is about the BIMS? The BIMS consists of really 3 components. There's the repetition of 3 words. Then there's C0300, which is your temporal orientation. So that's looking at orientation to year, month, and day. And then C0400, which is after we go through all of that, then we ask the person to recall, and certainly that's called recall. So can they carry through those 3 words, and do they need prompting? And the results are compiled into a summary score in C0500. So the basic interview instructions for the BIMS, we want to interview any patient not screened out by C0100. We want to conduct the interview in a private setting. It's really important to make sure the milieu for the interview is the right environment. So a quiet area, you don't want to have a lot of distractions. Think about yourself, right? If someone's asking you a series of questions and the phone's ringing, the TV's loud, and the kids are running around, and whatever the situation is, it's easy to get distracted by all of that. So we want to give the greatest chance possible for getting an accurate assessment. So try to find the quietest setting, ask if you can turn down or turn off a TV, make sure that the person can hear you. You want to minimize that background noise. You want to make sure if they use hearing aids, that the hearing aids are in, the hearing aids are functional. Sit so the patient can see your face. So where they, so there's not a glare, that they can see you and talk with you, and give an introduction before starting the interview. So you want to frame it for them. Who are you? What are you doing? And why you're doing this. Usually there's an anxiety sometimes. Oh my God, they're testing me. And you just need to say, listen, this is part of our assessment, and we do this for everyone, and go through it. So you don't want to add extra stress. You want to ensure and reinforce that we ask everyone the same set of questions. If the patient expresses concerns that you're testing his or her memory, you can give a possible response like, we ask these questions of everyone so we can make sure our care can meet your needs. Trying to just downplay it for them. Directly ask the patient each of the items in C0200 through 400 in one sitting and in the order provided. So this is one of those things, it is prescriptive. It has to be done in the exact, with the exact words, in the exact order, and in one setting. You can't do part of it, walk away, and do part of it again. If the patient chooses not to answer a particular item or provides a nonsensical response, that's okay. Accept his or her refusal or accept their response and move on to the next question. And code refusals as incorrect or could not recall. So when do you stop the interview? Stop the interview if necessary. Stop the interview after completing C0300C day of the week if all responses are nonsensical, or no verbal or written response to any of the questions up to this point, or no verbal or written response to some questions and nonsensical responses to the other questions. That's when you can stop the interview, but you've got to go all the way through C0300. If the interview is stopped, here's what we do. We code a dash in C0400A, C0400B, and C0400C. We want to code 99 in the summary score in C0500. And then we want to code 1 yes in C0600 should the staff assessment for mental status be conducted. And then complete the staff assessment for mental status. So what you're trying to say there is either they were unresponsive, they didn't want to engage, or they couldn't. They tried, but they couldn't engage. And by putting that code 99, then it automatically, you have to go over and do the staff assessment. If the patient's primary method of communication is a written format, the BIMS can be administered in writing. The administration of BIMS in writing should be limited to this circumstance only. So it shouldn't be our default. It should be kind of a last effort that we use to do the BIMS. So in coding C0200 through 500, if the staff member is unable to articulate or pronounce any of the cognitive interview items clearly for any reason, for example, accent or speech impairment, have a different staff member conduct the BIMS. Nonsensical responses should be coded as a 0. So a nonsensical response is an important concept to understand. Any response that is unrelated or incomprehensible or incoherent. It is not informative with respect to the item being rated. So if we're asking someone what month it is, and they go on to say, well, that is such a pretty yellow dress, and then the car, and they just go on, and they're having no relationship to what you've just asked. That's kind of a nonsensical. Or it may be that they're verbalizing things that you just can't comprehend. They're just tones, and you can't understand what they're saying. Interview and ask patients to state, for example, incorrect or nonsensical responses. Here's an example. Interview asks the patient to state the year, and the patient replies that it's 1935. The answer is incorrect, but it's related to the question, right? So they understood that you were asking for a year. In their world, it's 1935. So they gave you, so that's not a nonsensical response, right? It's related to what we asked. So this answer is coded as 0, incorrect, but would not be considered a nonsensical response. The answer is wrong, but it's logical and relates to the question. If the interviewer asks the patient to state the year, and the patient says, oh, what a difference does a year make when you are as old as I am? And the interviewer asks the patient to try to name the year, and the patient shrugs. This answer is coded as 0 incorrect, but would not be considered a nonsensical response. The answer is wrong because refusal is considered a wrong answer, but the patient's comment is logical and clearly relates to the question. In this example number 3, the interviewer asked the patients to name the day of the week, and the patient answers, Sylvia, she's my daughter. The answer is coded 0 incorrect. The response is illogical and nonsensical, has nothing to do with the day of the week. The answer is wrong, but the patient's comment clearly does not relate to the question and is nonsensical, so there's no correlation between the two. So in C0200, this item assesses the patient's ability to repeat and recall 3 words. Now, one of the questions that's always asked is, can we change the words? No. That's the answer. What you want to do is repeat the words, and the words are sock, blue, and bed. I used to see those in my dreams at night. The inability to repeat 3 words on the first attempt may indicate a memory impairment, a hearing impairment, a language barrier, or inattention that may be a sign of a delirium or other health issue. So that's where we're getting. So this is the immediate recall. So you say the 3 words, and then you ask them to say the 3 words. So how do we do this? Ask the question exactly as written. I'm going to say 3 words for you to remember. Please repeat the words after I have said all 3. The words are sock, blue, bed. Now tell me the 3 words. Use the words and related category cues as indicated. Interpreters should use equivalent words or similar relevant prompts for category clues, depending on the language. Immediately after presenting the 3 words, ask the patient to repeat them. If the patient correctly repeats all 3 words on the first attempt, reinforce by repeating the words with a categorical clue. This reinforcement is essential to evaluate the patient's ability to recall later in the interview. You want to code the response and move on to the next interview question. So what we're talking about here is sock, something you wear. What we're trying to do is give additional information so that when we go on to the recall questions, after we go through the year, month, and day, it gives a greater opportunity for the person to have success in this. So you're giving them kind of a framework for it. If the patient recalled 2 or fewer of words on the first attempt, code the items based on the patient's recall on the first attempt. So that's another area where people tend to code this incorrectly. So if they get all 3 words correct on the second attempt, it really doesn't matter. The code for this is what they say that first attempt. So you want to record that number. So code the item based on the patient's recall on the first attempt. Make a second attempt prompting the patient using the categorical clues. And if the patient does not recall all of the words on the second attempt, make a third attempt. Repeat the words and the categorical clues 1 more time. So we've given them kind of every opportunity at that point, but don't go past that third time of giving prompts. If the patient does not repeat all 3 words after the 3 attempts, reassess the ability to hear. If the patient can hear, move on to the next questions. If the patient is unable to hear, attempt to maximize hearing, alter the environment, use the hearing amplifier before proceeding, making sure the batteries, whatever it is. So you make sure that the first kind of thing is, can they actually hear what I'm saying? Because if they can't, then of course they're going to struggle to be able to repeat the words. So what is a category clue? And I've kind of already talked a little bit about this. It's a phrase that puts the word into some sort of context. So it's not just remembering a word, it takes that word and then puts it in context. So it helps prompt the patient's recall ability, it stimulates learning, it fosters memory even among patients able to repeat the words immediately. So the clues for C0200 are, for socks, something you wear, blue, a color, and for bed, a piece of furniture. So those would be the categorical clues that you would use. Words may be recalled in any order and in any context. Repeating words in a sentence counts as repeating the words. Score the number of words repeated on the first attempt only. Do not score the number of repeated words on the second or third attempt, and do not record the number of attempts that the patient needed to complete. If the interviewer cannot say words clearly, have another staff member conduct the interview. For example, this would be a nurse or social worker, whoever's doing the interview. If they had an issue with maybe a speech impediment or something, or they had an accent that the patient struggled with to understand, where the words were not very clear, then we want to, again, set our patients up for success, not failure. So we may ask another staff member to do the interview. The BIMS may be conducted in writing in limited circumstances, which we talked about, and consult Section C in your IRF-PAI manual for guidance on exactly how to complete these interviews. So in C0200, their coding instructions, we want to record the maximum number of words that the patient correctly repeated on the first attempt only. I think if you haven't gotten that, we need to do the first attempt only. We're kind of beating the dead horse. So what you really want to do is just say, how many words were they able to repeat? Were they able to repeat 3 words, 2 words, 1 word, or none on that first attempt? So we're going to do a practice scenario here. So the interviewer, the interviewer says to the patient, the words are, and they've already done all the other things, right? They made sure they can hear, that they've adjusted the environment and whatnot. The words are sock, blue, and bed. Now please tell me the 3 words. And the patient says bed, sock, and blue. The interview repeats the 3 words with the category clue by saying, that's right, the words are sock, something to wear, blue, a color, and bed, a piece of furniture. How would you code C0200 number of words repeated by the patient on their first attempt? So this is Slido. Okay, and people respond, a little sluggish after lunch here, but we're getting there. Okay, let's see what the answer is. And it is correct. Most people had this, that they were able to get the 3 words right away. The patient was able to repeat all 3 items on the first attempt, and the order of repetition does not affect the score, right? We didn't care what order, but they had the 3 words. So here in C0200, you would enter the code, you would put the number 3 because they were able to get the 3 words. So let's look at another scenario. So the words, the interviewer says to the patient, the words are sock, blue, and bed. Now please tell me the 3 words. And the patient says, well, it's sock, bed, and black. The interviewer repeats the 3 words plus the categorical clues. Let me say the 3 words again. They are sock, something to wear, blue, a color, and bed, a piece of furniture. Now tell me the 3 words. The patient says, oh yes, that's right, sock, blue, bed. So how would you code C0200? The number of words that the patient was able to get after their first attempt. Okay, let's see what the answer is. And the answer is 2. And the rationale for this is the patient repeated 2 of the 3 items. Remember, they got black instead of blue on the first attempt. And the patient are scored based on the first attempt. Even though the second attempt, they got all 3 words. We're coding on that first attempt. Another quick scenario. The words are sock, blue, and bed. Now please tell me the 3 words. And the patient says, blue socks belong in the dresser. The interviewer repeats the 3 words plus the categorical clues. So how would we code this C0200? How many words did they repeat on the first attempt? So let's see. Let you guys just Slido. We're a little split here. This is great. I love when we have different opinions on answers. Okay, we've got a pretty good response. Let's go ahead and see what the answer was. And the answer here was 2. And let's go through why, because we had a lot of people that were kind of split on this one. So you would code 2 because the patient got 2 of the 3 words. The patient repeated 2 of the 3 items, blue and sock. The patient put the words into a sentence. So I think if his sentence was, let me just look at it here. He said that that the person said, I think he said dresser instead of the blue socks go in the dresser. See, I can't even recall. It's after lunch, right? But so he said dresser instead of bed and that. So even though they put it into a sentence, that would be perfectly fine. You just have to make sure that they have the 3 words that you're looking for in it. All right, so let's go into now the temporal orientation. So here we have C0300. Let's just get to that. And here we are. In general, we're looking for temporal orientation, the ability to place oneself in correct time. For the BIMS, it is the ability to indicate the correct date in current surroundings. Ask the patient each of the 3 questions separately. So C0300A, what is the current year? 300B, which is the current month. 300C, day of the week. Allow up to 30 seconds for a response to each question. So we have to allow people to take the information in, process the information, and then come up with the answer and then give you the answer. So you have to be patient. And I know that's really hard, especially if you're really busy, but this is the type of thing you have to allow someone time to process it. In this scenario, in this area, we're not providing any clues. And if the patient specifically asks for clues, respond by saying that you need to know if they can answer without any assistance. So here we have the coding for this particular item. When we're looking to tell us the year, please tell me what year it is right now. And then when you're coding this or looking at the answer, able to report the correct year. So they told us that it's 2019. 2, they missed by a year. Maybe they said it was 2018. Or they missed by 2 to 5 years. So maybe they said it was 2017. Or they missed greater than 5 years. Well, it's, 1983. So they totally, or they didn't give you an answer. So you have to, a couple of things on this. 1, orient yourself first. What is the year? What is the month? What is the day? So you want to make sure you have that down. And then you probably, sometimes it's hard to encode these, so you just maybe want to just write down what the answers are that they gave you, or however you want to do this, or take a second and to calculate, or that they get it correct. Is it 2 to 5 years or greater than 5 years? All right, so let's look at a quick practice scenario. The date of the interview, and so they're orienting you here, right? August 4th, 2019 is the day you're doing the interview. So please tell me what year it is right now. And the patient says 19. Can you tell me, and the interviewer then says, can you tell me the full year? And the patient says 19. And the interviewer says, can you tell me the full year, for example, 1982? And the patient says, oh, 2019. How would you code C0300A? Okay. Most people are saying code 3, correct? Let's look at the answer. And in fact, you're right, code 3, correct. So they were just giving, framing it a little bit. They weren't giving a clue. They were asking kind of for the full answer, not just the 19 in that particular scenario. So even though 19 is partially correct, the only correct answer is the exact year. The patient must state 2019, not just 19, or 1819, or 1919. So they must say 2019. So coding the month, assess the ability to report the correct month, count the current day as day 1. So in this, it's a little different. Now here's another way of coding. So this is for month. What month are we in right now? Able to report the correct month. So 2, they're accurate within 5 days, because if the month just changed, it might have just been, might be August 1st, okay? So maybe they, said it was the end of July. Missed by 6 days to 1 month. See where you might need to write this down so you can do the calculations. Or missed by greater than a month, or there was no answer. So a little bit different for the month. In most instances, it will be immediately obviously which code to select. If you're unsure whether the date given is within 5 days, record the patient's response on a piece of paper. This allows you to verify the date before selecting the code response to ensure accuracy. So this is one I actually would encourage you to just bring a piece of scrap paper with you. So practice coding scenario 5. So the date of the interview is June 2nd, 2019, and the patient states that it's May. So how would you code C0300B? Okay. Let's look at the answer. And the answer would be code 2, accurate within 5 days. Because it's June 2nd, and they said it was May. They didn't give you the exact day in May, but so it's within 5 days of the month changing over. That's how that one is coded. So June 2nd minus 5 days is May 29th. So the patient correctly stated the month within 5 days, even though the current month is June. So you would put a 2 there. So the next thing we want to do is assess the patient's ability to report the correct day of the week. This is a simpler one. You're able to the person you're asking what day of the week is it today. They're able to report correct day of the week. So 1 would be correct, or 2 or 0 is incorrect, or no answer. So this is a little simpler. Let's look at a coding scenario. So the date of the interview is Thursday, August 15, 2019. The patient states that it's Tuesday. So how would we code C0300C? Okay, and let's see what the answer is. And we would code this as 0, incorrect, or no answer. And our rationale for this is that the patient incorrectly stated the day of the week. So this is either a kind of a correct or not correct. Let's look at recall. This is C0400, recall. In this area, we're asking the patient to repeat the words from the earlier question. So you can imagine you're giving the 3 words, you're asking for a response, you're giving categorical clues, then we're asking about the year, the month, the day, and now we're into the recall questions in exactly that order. So ask the patient to repeat the words from the earlier questions, read questions exactly as they appear on the IRF-PAI, allow up to 5 seconds for spontaneous recall of each word. For any word not correctly recalled after 5 seconds, provide then a category clue. The category clues should be used only after the patient is unable to recall 1 or more of the 3 words. Allow up to 5 seconds after the categorical clue for each missed word to be recalled. And then for coding this, code yes, no clue required. So correctly remember the word spontaneously without any cueing. Or code 1, yes after cueing, requires the category clue to remember the words. And then code 0, no, could not recall. Cannot recall the words even after the cueing. Responds with nonsensical answers or chooses not to answer the item. For some coding tips here, if on the first try without cueing, the patient names multiple items in a category, one of which is correct, they should be coded as correct for that item. So code 2, yes, no clue required. If the interviewer gives the patient a cue and the patient then names multiple items in the category, code as could not recall, even if the correct item was in the list. So code 0, could not recall. So let's look at a coding scenario here. So the patient is asked to recall the 3 words that they were initially presented. And the patient says socks, shoes, and bed. The interviewer, 1 word was a color. Oh, the shoes were blue. So how would we code this? How would we code, you code C0400. And I guess it's not a Slido. So everyone got it in your head, how we code this? Okay. So how would you code C0400? We asked the patient, so let's go back to early questions. We asked about the 3 words. If they're unable to remember a word, give a clue. So able to recall sock, yes, right? They answered that without any clue, so we'd say a 2 there. So the next question is, they're able to recall blue. They were able to do it, but we had to give them a clue, right? We had to give that categorical clue of a color. And then how about bed? It was 2. Yes, they were able to get that with no cluing required. So they were able to get the sock and the bed, and they didn't get the blue correct, so we gave them categorical clue, and that's how we would code that section. So I just went through all of this. So the patient independently recalled the items on the first attempt for the ones that were coded as a 2. All right, let's look at a practice scenario 8 here. So the patient is asked to recall the 3 words. And the patient says, I don't remember. And the interviewer says, one word was something you wear. The patient says, oh, clothes. And the interviewer says, okay, one word was a color. And the patient says, oh, blue. And then the interviewer says, okay, the last word was a piece of furniture. Couch. So let's see how we would, how would you code C0400A through C? Okay, so we have most people saying coding D, sock and bed as 0, no, could not recall, and coding blue as 1, yes after cluing. So let's see what the answer is. And code D was correct. So the code sock and bed they were able to get, and so I'm sorry, sock and bed as 0, no, they could not recall, but they did recall blue, so that was yes after queuing. And so this is how we would, if you were encoding this actually on the form, this is what it would look like. Okay, so sock would be coded as 0, no, could not recall. The patient did not recall the item even after a clue, a C0400B. The blue would be coded as 1, yes after queuing. And then the patient did not recall after being given a clue for C0400B. And then C0400C, bed, would be coded as 0, no, could not recall. The patient did not recall the item even after the clue. I'm sorry, C400B, they did remember after a clue, so that'd be coded as yes. So let's look at the summary score. The BIMS is a brief screener that aids in detecting cognitive impairment, and the total score, it decreases the chance of incorrect labeling, which we talked about, of cognitive ability. It improves detection of delirium. It provides staff with more reliable estimate of the patient function, and allows staff interaction with the patient that are based on more accurate impressions of the patient's ability, so it can reinforce that. So what you want to do is look at C0200 through 400. We want to add up the values for all BIMS questions. The lowest possible valid score is 00. That is a valid score for the BIMS, which means even if the person got a 00, you would not go on to do the staff assessment. Some people get confused about that. The maximum possible score is a 15. So you would add in the score. Hopefully, if you're in a computerized medical record, it does it for you, but you would add in the score there. And again, remembering that code 00 is a valid score. Do not add the total score while you are interviewing the patient. Focus your full attention on the interview. It can be very distracting if you're constantly going back and trying to do all of this. Apply the guidelines for determining if the interview is complete or incomplete. So a total score reflects cognitive status. So this is just for your information. It's probably good for your staff to understand. A code of between 13 to 15 means the person is cognitively intact. A score between 8 to 12 means there's a moderate impairment. And a score of 00 to 07 means that there's a severe impairment. And that would be important to communicate and probably care plan for your patient, having that information. Code the total score as a 2-digit number, including a leading 0, for scores less than 10. So if it was a 9, you'd want to put a 09. The scores will range from 00 to 15, which we talked about. The code 99, if unable to complete the interview, and we talked about that in the beginning, if they were all nonsensical responses or they just refused to even talk to you. A 0 code of 00 does not mean the interview was incomplete. It's actually a valid score. Occasionally, a patient can communicate but chooses not to participate in the BIMS and therefore does not attempt any of the items in the section. This would be considered an incomplete interview. Enter code 99 for C0500, the summary score, and complete the staff assessment for mental status. So very quickly, the patient score on items C0200 through C0400C are listed below. How would you code C0500 BIMS score? So I'll give you a second to add it up, and then I'm going to move on to the question. Everyone did the math? Okay. How would you code C0500 BIMS summary score? Okay, let's look at the answer. Most people got this correct. It was 12. So it's just a quick math if you were didn't get a chance to add that all together. I think that was the issue. I think a couple people said 13. So coding 0500 would be 12. The sum of 0200 through C0400C equals 12. So we would put 12 in that scoring. For the BIMS to be considered a complete interview, the patient has attempted to answer at least 4 of the questions of C0200 through C0400C, so they've at least tried. The answers have been relevant. We talked about that. To be relevant, a response only has to be related to the question, somehow logical, and the responses do not have to be correct. So it's a valid response even if it's incorrect. For item C0500, a score of 00 means the answers were relevant, logical, but incorrect. And then a score of 00 does not mean the BIMS is incomplete. It means you have completed it, so you wouldn't do the staff assessment. What constitutes an incomplete interview? So this is, again, from a training perspective, very important. The patient chooses not to participate in the BIMS. 4 or more of the items were scored 0 because the patient chose not to answer or gave nonsensical responses. And if any of the BIMS items is coded with a dash. To be incomplete, a patient has to choose not to answer or give completely unrelated nonsensical responses to 4 or more items for this to be incomplete. For incomplete interview, conduct 0200 through 0300 with all patients attempting the interview. Stop the interview after completing C0300, day of the week if. Again, the responses to C0300A, B, and C have been nonsensical or nonverbal or written responses to any of the questions up to this point, meaning they haven't responded, or no verbal or written responses to some questions and nonsensical responses to others. If the interview is stopped, enter a dash into C0400A, B, and C, and then code C0500 with that code of 99, unable to complete the interview. And then we must go on and complete the staff assessment. The mental status can vary among persons. So mental status can vary among persons unable to communicate or who do not complete the interview. Therefore, a report of observed behavior is needed for patients unable to complete the BIMS. So this is the staff assessment. When cognitive impairment is incorrectly diagnosed or missed, appropriate communication techniques, activities, and therapies may not be offered because we said, oh, they can't interact. So review the BIMS score at C0500, determine if the BIMS was complete successfully or not, and then if a summary score of 99 is there, we want to go to the staff assessment for mental status at C0900 should be conducted. So coding instructions for C0600, we want to say the question is, should the staff assessment for mental status be conducted? And it's, if you would code 0, no, interview was completed, or the summary score was between 0 and 15. Or we want to say, yes, the interview was not completed and or the summary score was 99, which then tells us we have to go on and do the staff assessment. So again, reinforcing this idea, if the patient's score is 0, please do not go on and do the staff assessment. The BIMS is complete with a valid score of 0. And this is where people want to go on and do the staff assessment. So C0900, An observed memory or recall problem may indicate a cognitive impairment, need for additional support with reminders to support increased independence, and delirium if there represents a change from the baseline for this particular patient. So what do we do? Well, we want to ask the patient about items in C0900. Is it fall, winter, spring, or summer? What's the name of this place? Will you show me your room? Ask the patient to show the way to his or her room. Observe the patient's ability to find his or her way. For patients with limited communication skills, ask direct care staff across all shifts and families or significant others about their recall ability. You want to review the medical record. We want to observe the patient, staff across all shifts and departments, and others with close contact to the patient. Where you see we're relying on other people to interpret what we're seeing to give us an answer for these particular questions. And as we know, if we can somehow ask the patient or engage the patient, we're going to get much more accurate information. For the coding of C0900, check each item the patient recalls. So check Z, none of the above, if the patient recalls none of the items. So was the patient able to recall the current season, location or room? They might not be able to tell you the room number, but they can take you right to their room, so they know where it is. Staff names or faces, even if the name isn't correct, but they always call you Molly. You're Molly to them for whatever reason. Your name could be Ann, but they call you Molly, but they're consistent. Like when they don't call everyone Molly, but they call you Molly. That he or she is in a hospital or hospital unit, that they're able to tell that, especially if it's a IRF within a hospital. They may not understand, that they're in an IRF, but they can tell that they're in a hospital, so that's fine, or none of the above. All right, we're going to take about 8 minutes or so, because I'll be winding down. In your packets, it's handout number 10. If you can pull that out, find a partner. And we want to do, we have 2 scripts in your packet. There's 3 papers in there. There's BIMS role play script 1, script 2, and then there's role play coding sheet in here. The goal here is to get it to go through this at least once. Has everyone found their handouts? And hopefully those that are watching live stream, you found the handouts. Pull someone in to practice this with. What I want you to do is pair off. So if you don't have a partner, find a partner somewhere. Be nice, allow other people to come in, because there's a lot of tables with just 3. So find another person. We want one person to take the script. I want this half of the room, right from this table here in front of me to my right, take script number 1. So someone's going to be the patient, and someone is going to be the recorder in this. Have fun with it. This can be interesting. From this table over here, so you guys, to my left, please use script number 2 and do the same thing. One's going to be the interviewer, one will be a patient, and you'll have your recording sheet. If for some reason you get through these quickly enough, you can switch roles, but I will call this in just a couple of minutes. So get started, find a partner. All right, so let's go through. We're going to look at these in 2 different ways. We have script number 1 to my right, your left, and then to my left, we did script number 2. So let's look at how this went. So did you come up, so those who did script number 1, let's look at the coding here. So the patient score in C0200, ability to repeat the 3 words. Did everyone get a 0? Yes? Okay. The year, we had a 1. Okay, good. The month, a 0. We're pretty comfortable with that. Okay, the day, a 0. Then in the recall items, so 400A, recall of sock, we have a 0. Recall of blue, we have a 0. And recall of bed, a 0. And so the BIMS summary score here for this patient or this practice script was an 01. And is that a valid score? Right. Okay, good. So for our people who did script number 2, let's look at how you did with the scoring. So the ability to repeat 3 words, we got a 3. C0300A, the year, we got a 3. The month, we got a 2. The day, we got a 0. Then the recall items, so in 400A, they were able to recall a sock, we got a 1. The color blue, they got 1. And the furniture, the bed, we got a 1. So they have a BIMS score of 11. You had 12? Okay, so I'll look to my team who did the scenario. I'd have to go back through the scenarios. Let's look, okay, so it's a good point. So we can, script number 2. So this date was here, was August 16. You're right, they got the year? Yep. Okay, we okay with the correct coding? No? So it was, okay, so it was temporal orientation, so the year. So the date, for the purpose of the interview for this, the script number 2, it's Friday, August 16th, right? So they said, please tell me the year. So 2019, they got correct, right? And then for the, what month are we in right now? They said it was August. Huh? Okay. Okay. All right. All right. So again, these kind of activities, you can have fun. You don't even need to script these. These can be hysterical if one person's playing the patient. You can really have a blast with someone, and you can go off script. And then how do they pull you back in to get you focused? You know, if you're getting distracted from every little thing. So I've done these with a lot of staff members, and these can be quite fun. I love being the patient. I have a lot of fun with it. So, but for training purposes, there's also a BIMS video, and this is in the CMS YouTube channel, and you can view it. And there is a connection there when these get posted, so you can actually go out and look at those. Those were set up originally. That video, if I remember correctly, was the one that was done for SNF, but it does give you a scenario and having you kind of walk through it, so someone can actually visualize it and see it. So in summary, I think the messages to take away from it is complete the BIMS on all patients, follow the instructions. This is one that is so rigid, and if you have staff going, you know, off in different ways and not following the script exactly as it should be followed. So this is an opportunity to take this situation or others and actually have your staff be deemed competent, whoever's doing these interviews, and only complete item C0900 staff assessment for mental status, memory, and recall if the patient refuses to answer or gives nonsensical responses. It is not as valid and reliable as doing the actual BIMS, so we certainly want to do the BIMS at all, if at all possible. I always encourage you to record something in your action plan. Did you take something away from this experience today? Could you bring back to your organization? How comfortable are you that your staff will be able to and are following these instructions exactly as written? And then I would actually even push you a little farther to say, once you take this information, is it staying in isolation on the form, or are you using it in your care planning, and how are you communicating that to your whole team? Thank you very much, and then I think we're on to the case study.